Hey y'all, this is the How to MSP podcast, brought to you by Ridgeview Advisors. I'm your host, Andrew Moore.
It's very easy when you're looking at time per ticket, tickets taken per day, burn rate. You can see where the deficiencies are. And then it's about, again, accountability, making sure that the team lead is reaching out and finding out why. There could be some personal reason why something's going on. Maybe that engineer is a little burnt out. Maybe they need a day off. It's something as simple as that. Maybe they're just not following the process and they're not showing their stuff. Maybe their time per ticket is too high because they're not following that escalation path or that collaboration path.
That was Jon Katz, COO of LISS Technologies from the great state of New York. Jon is in charge of global operations and strategic initiatives. Jon's been 25 years in the technology space, where he's been a systems engineer, a VoIP engineer, and he's also been a consultant. Jon is excited today to share with us how his service desk works remotely and how the pod structure he's implemented has helped his MSP be super successful.
All right, we are live with Jon Katz from LISS out of New York City. Good morning, Jon. How are you?
Doing well, Andrew. How are you today?
Fantastic. Where does the podcast find you this fine morning?
Sure. I'm in our Roslyn office, which is the old My Father's Place, a music venue.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
So like, what kind of music did they play there?
Everything from the Ramones to, I believe Madonna was here.
What?
The Police, a bunch of different bands came through here. It was actually a lot of history in the building. It was a car dealership, a bowling alley, a music venue. It was a lot of cool things. Now it's a cool IT company.
That's awesome. That's so being like Springsteen too. Like
He was here. Yeah.
Nice. I love.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people that I love the boss. I've never seen him live, but I really like Springsteen. But I'm probably one of those people that I really like Born to Run more than I like all of his. And that I might probably get in a lot of trouble for that. But I love Born to Run. But then some of his other stuff, I like it, but I don't love it. But I love Born to Run. So
yeah, people either love or hate him. When I hear this time of year, the Christmas stuff comes up.
Yeah,
I don't like it.
Not a fan, huh?
I'm not a fan. But yeah, you can't. It's hard to not like him. But people either love him or hate him.
Yeah. Well, the live stuff I've heard, which is I've heard some of the live stuff on E Street Radio and Sirius and stuff, and I've heard people describe a Springsteen concert as pure joy. And I've listened to the live stuff and there's songs on there that I don't know, but I'm like, damn, that sounds like a throwdown. It sounds like it would be a lot of fun to see him live, even if you don't know the music. So I get it.
That's fair. Cool.
I can see that. So Jon, we know each other from TBG. So we were in the Taylor Business Group together in the operations, the COOs group. So why don't you talk a little bit just real quick about, what you do at LISS, where you came from, how you got here, what's been going on with you from a career standpoint?
Sure, man. I've always been in technology. I mean, I was I'll start back with when I was 13, 14 years old. My mom was the first cell phone store in New York, so I got to hang out in the back and burn NAMs and program phones and watch all these. Back then you had to open up the transceivers and literally program these things, and so that was my background back then. Like a lot of others, I got into gaming in the mid 90s, and obviously you have to have the latest greatest, so upgrading machines and having LAN parties and stuff like that. So that's what got me into computers. But yeah, man, I'm an audio engineer. I was an audio engineer by trade, so kind of always in that technical realm. In '99, I started with a partner out of necessity for some of our clients back then, just break fix stuff, and mostly in Long Island and Manhattan. And I had met up with the LISS group back in 2006. I actually installed the phone in the owner's car, and that's how we met. And actually, his dad.
It says a lot. Installed a phone into a car.
Yeah, man.
That was
They're
back
big
in the
50.
day.
Yeah, when I first started doing installs, I mean, transceivers were 50 pounds. We had to run 6-gauge wires to the trunk just to power the things. But yeah, so my mom was the first cell phone store in New York. My stepdad was one of the first beeper stores in New York. So that's how they met. But the owner of LISS, which is the current owner's one of the current owner's father, he used to buy his beepers through Neil, and when they had phones to install, I would install the phones, and that's how we all met. And from 2006, I left for a few years. Grass isn't always greener. Came back, um, and been here since.
So I want to talk to you today for a couple of minutes, while I got you, about remote work and how you built your team. Because, right now, from when I first met you in TBG and when we first got to know each other, your teams were all working in an office in downtown New York, or then maybe there was a satellite office. But from what I remember, there was a very expensive piece of real estate that you had to maintain. This was like pre-pandemic. And I remember when we would talk in our group meetings, we would have these conversations about when they were measuring our MSPs against your MSP, you would always get somebody would take out the stick and they would beat you about cost per employee, right? Like overhead costs, stuff like that. And you would be like, listen, like I have an office in New York. Like I'm hiring people in New York. What do you want me to do?
Yeah.
So I know that over time you started to figure out how to maybe make some changes to continue to create a consistent service quality, but also like lower your costs. And that came with bringing remote people onto the team, right? Because you've only so many people you can hire in the city of New York, right? For your first problem, but then all the other challenges. So like, can you just elaborate a little bit on like kind of
Yeah.
where you guys were and like what drove you to start trying to figure out how to find talent outside of, the Big Apple?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know our first meeting together. By the way, that was I looked it up before. That was back in early 2018. So we know each other quite a while now. One of the
You drove
things
you
that
drove us around, and you drove us around after we had had too many drinks, and you took us to
In and Out.
In-N-Out Burger when we were in
That's
San
right.
Francisco. That was awesome.
That was my
It was
first
one of
time
my
I saw
favorite.
animal style fries. By the way.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
good stuff. That was good stuff.
So yeah. So one of the things that the whole group said to me was, why don't you guys have like interns or first line support? Because I always for me it's always about L2 and up. Like that's all we want to hire. And my answer back then was similar to what you were talking about. Like our cost per seat is just too much to bring in an intern or something like that because the cost of real estate and overhead it doesn't work. Um, and yeah, the other thing about New York is it's a very competitive market. So trying to get all of your talent from this local area is hard. So I would say in right around there, right about that 2018 mark, we started looking for remote employees. Didn't always go great. We didn't have a structure in place. We didn't have the visibility to see what these engineers were necessarily working on or doing. We didn't have any accountability for remote employees or anything like that. So I think what we ended up doing was shortly after we started moving into a pod kind of a model where um, we're able to have a certain set of engineers, a certain set of escalations and team leads to look over just a smaller group. That way, your accountability is shrinking down to under 8 people, and I think that was the biggest thing. When we first met, I believe we had like maybe 12 to 15 direct reports, and it doesn't work. Anything over 8 starts getting rough.
So that's an interesting point. Like you've been in a situation where, and I mean this with all the accolades that it comes with this, because you've been successful in overcoming them. You've had challenges that you've had to overcome. Like you've made mistakes. Like what mistakes do you see other MSPs make when it comes to dealing with remote work and trying to find how that balance works? And just like, what did you overcome? What challenges did you have to overcome? Like what advice can you give to people on like starting to build a remote team?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I could tell you guys beat us up pretty bad that first tailor meeting. And like you always do, you challenged us as well. But I would say again, the first thing is structure, right? You need to make sure that you have the team in place to oversee remote workers. And what I mean by that is you need to have someone that's sitting there and their job is to literally look at throughput for remote engineers. Um, it's also hiring the right people, because working from your home all day, every day, without the social interaction with, the person right next to you, it's not for everybody. So something as simple as discussing that during the hiring process, like, have you worked remotely before? Do you see yourself being able to work remotely in a scenario where you don't have a coworker next to you all the time? Some of the things that we do is we make sure that we have a huddle every day. We need to make sure that we're in contact with that every day. Andrew, one of the things that you always said to me was like, have a best friend at work. That's really hard when you're remote. So again, making sure that your team lead or whoever you have overseeing that pod or that group of remote engineers, they become friends, because you need to have that person that you can reach out to and talk to all day. Sitting in solitude is rough. It really is. So I would say that that's probably the biggest thing.
So if you're, there's a couple of things that come to mind I want to touch on. It's a two-part question. One is, if you're not big enough to break into pods, right? Like you only have 4 or 5 people, but you want to start hiring remotely. Can you do this without having multiple pods, I guess? And so when you talk about pods, how do you see that? The other is, where in the hell do you find these people, right? How do you find remote people, and like, how does that work, right? So I guess that's two things I'd like to dig into a little bit there.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say if you're not small enough to have a full, let's say, remote pod, my suggestion would be a tag team. So you have one person who you see has some leadership skills on the team that you could potentially offer a growth path to eventually be a team lead. Have them start tag teaming. Have them start looking at what a remote engineer is working on. Having them check in through the day. That's potentially how you can work. We were lucky enough to have enough people to start breaking out into pods when we started doing this. And then we work with one single recruiter. And we
You can
like
name
it.
drop if you want, unless you don't want to, but it's fine if you
No,
do.
we work with Apollo staffing. What we found was, in the beginning we were working with multiple recruiters, but it is so much easier to work with a single recruiter. If you need to have a backfill, it's always from the same person. Um, they we're at the point now with Apollo where we could just say, hey, we have this opening. Here's the job description, and they know what we're looking for. So to try to get that relationship and try to hone down skill sets and really just trying to get across what we're looking for to multiple recruiters was so hard. So again, we've standardized with Apollo staffing. They've been fantastic for us. We do about 10 placements a year, 10 to 12 placements a year with them. Obviously, we're growing, so we haven't stopped hiring since since we met. I think one of the
Yeah.
first things that we said, and the reason why we started looking outside of New York, was we couldn't hire fast enough.
Like I'm interested though, before we kind of dig into like core processes and whatnot, the structure of the pod, it's something that I teach in my training and coaching, which is this ability to not really be able to manage more than 8 to 10 people at any given time. I feel like that's a really core KPI that as a company begins to grow, when you have 10, 15, 20 direct reports, that's a problem, right? Because I believe that, to your point, which I think we're going to drop into here in a second, I want to touch on, is if you want to be able to manage remote workers, there's a level of accountability, interaction, oversight that is different than if you can stand in a service center and like kind of listen to what everybody's doing and walk around and check on them, right? Like, I think, you could maybe make the argument that you could manage 15 or more people and maybe not well, but better in an environment where you're physically there with them. But if you're dealing with remote workers, like, that 8-to-1 ratio really makes a lot of sense, right?
It does. It does. Yeah. I mean, for us, especially in the beginning, what we said was, okay, if we had 4 engineers to every about one escalation, you know, that's a decent ratio. If we can get 5 to 2, that's a great ratio. Have a team lead on top of them. If someone's out that day, everybody shifts down. So if you have an escalation out, that team lead turns into an escalation for the day. If you have a first line support engineer that's out, your escalation slides into that slot. So as long as you can be fluid with it, I think a smaller pod certainly works. Obviously, when you start getting a little larger, when you can have, maybe 7 people in a pod with 2 or 3 escalations. Now you're at that kind of 10 to 1 ish ratio where I think that works out really well for accountability and sustainability too, because at a certain point, like it gets hard to manage and to do the one-on-ones. And that's another thing. Like it's super important to get one-on-ones in there. Make sure you have SMART goals um, the ability for your engineers to grow and get those on a board and talk about it. But yeah, we weekly one-on-ones are huge. And then when you start saying, hey, now you need to have 12 or 15 one-on-ones in a week, it starts
Right.
getting very time consuming.
So I want to get into a little bit about what works and, kind of how the processes go. And something I do want to talk about here is you use the word throughput before, which I'm a huge fan of throughput and work manifest or artifacts, whatever you want to call them, whether that's a ticket or project, like just moving work through the system. And then you talked about the pods and the one-on-ones. How do you make sure that you are telling the team in the field exactly what you expect from them and then using the one-on-one to reinforce that? Like, are you dealing with, like, when you talk about throughput, is it number of tickets? Is it amount of time on tickets? Like what, like kind of generally, what are you doing to try to keep your client satisfaction scores high and maintain your SLAs? Like, what are you doing there with these remote team
Sure.
members?
So it's always a balance, right? So we want to see, first and foremost, we want to give our engineers the ability to learn and grow. So to throw any situation at an engineer, I think is wonderful for them to be able to grow. You can't pigeonhole and expect them to grow. But that being said, there has to be some type of a constraint there where, again, you can't have a client waiting for 3 hours because you have a junior engineer working on something. So what we do is we have time limits internally where we say, hey, there's no clear path to resolution after this amount of time. Collaborate with the peer. And that certainly helps with remote workers as well, where we used to have the ability to overhear or listen. In an office, someone pops their head up and said and
Yeah.
hears something. It's not there anymore. So again, collaborating with a peer, and that could be your team lead, that could be someone else on your team, that could be me. It doesn't matter with anybody. So I would say that that's certainly important. So as far as some of the KPIs, obviously I know we used to not be a huge fan of tracking utilization, but we do track utilization, and what we see is utilization is time in the system. It used to be much harder to track this. Now that we've moved PSAs, it's so much easier. I spent a lot of my career, telling everybody, put your time in, put your time in, put your time in. Now that we moved PSAs, it's like, don't touch time. The PSA does it for you. But we look at utilization, we look at time per ticket, tickets per day, escalation rate. It starts painting a picture. If you have I'll use some KPIs here. So if you have an engineer that's about a half hour per per ticket and their utilization is above 80%, well, you could do the math. You're seeing 12 tickets a day easy.
Yeah.
But when you start reverse engineering an engineer that's underperforming, it's very easy when you're looking at time per ticket, tickets taken per day, burn rate. And you can see where the deficiencies are. And then it's about, again, accountability, making sure that the team lead is reaching out and finding out why. There could be some personal reason why something's going on. Maybe that engineer is a little burnt out. Maybe they need a day off. It's something as simple as that. Um, Maybe they're just not following the process and they're not showing their stuff. Maybe their time per ticket is too high because they're not following that escalation path or that collaboration path.
Are you also, one of the things that we started was, I had this epiphany, because I used to work in restaurants, right? So I had this epiphany of like open and close shift routines. the goal is to have whoever comes in to make sure that they do a certain thing in the morning, every morning before they get ready to work. And then at the end of the day, they're doing something similar. And then we would use the one-on-ones to kind of verify, hey, how well are we doing this week on staying on top of stuff? Have you guys integrated any of that into what you're currently doing, or are the one-on-ones enough? Like, just because I know you guys are at scale, you're a much larger MSP. So I'm just curious how that was working out for y'all if you do it.
Yeah, our engineers know what they're supposed to do in the morning. I mean, it's when you first come in, it's checking any of your waiting internals, it's checking any of your open tickets, and then it's getting on the desk and grabbing those new tickets. We do have lists for our team leads, just things that you're supposed to do through the day. Coordinators have their lists again. Hey, every hour you have to check this. Every, twice a day you have to check that. We're in the middle of coming up with we're actually almost done with our AI shift reporting now, which is cool. So what we're doing is we're having the system pre-search and present that with AI summaries to the team leads with anything that may need eyes on it. So, and then because of, what's the ticket notes and what's in that ticket, AI can potentially suggest next steps. So an example would be if like we had an overnight shift that, it's a P1 that came in, there's no internet at this location, and the ticket note says something about having a dispatcher first thing in the morning. AI will know that that was a P1. There was a last note was in there. It's still open. You can read through the notes, see what's going on, and suggest that we need to dispatch first thing, and it's going to summarize that and present it to our team leads.
That's pretty cool. Like, not
We're
gonna
getting
lie.
there, man.
Yeah, that's hot. That's hot shit.
Yeah.
So, for the one-on-ones that you do, are you sitting down with the team members and providing them their list of like KPIs? Like, look, chief, like, looks like this week you only closed, 6 tickets on 2 days. Like, what's going on? Like, are you going through that process with them, or is it the one-on-one more of like touchy-feely? Like, how does it work with you?
Yes. Yeah. So basically, we do this in Planner, and the Planner basically has a bunch of different columns, and one of the columns is KPIs. We touch on KPIs in these one-on-ones. Another column is engineer feedback. So what kind of feedback do you have for your manager and the team? Another column is manager feedback. We have an potential issues column where, hey, you missed a callback or you missed this something or a thing that gets put in that column. And then what we have is our long-term goals as well. Again, we don't want people to stagnate here. Even as in the beginning where, during the interview process, one of the questions that I always ask when I'm on an interview is, where do you want to be? If we had any position here open today, what do you want to do? And the same thing is, where do you want to be in a few years? Let's make sure that we could, at least get that path in front of you.
Every service desk has got a different kind of model. I know, I'm just trying to make sure I get in front of the naysayers out there that are going to be like, well, that just won't work for me. How do you guys take tickets? Do you guys allow clients to call in directly? Do you take just tickets through a portal? Like, I mean, so I guess my question is more about like, if you're building out pods and you're creating structure around that, people are going to have excuses as to about, well, I have to have a bunch of people answering the phones, or I have to have this, or I have to have that. Like, what do you say to that? Like, what do you say to about like, hey, we've done it this way and this works for us, and
Yeah. Listen, everything works different for every company. I could tell you what works. What wasn't working for us was multiple intake methods and our inability to prioritize based on the actual issue or a real priority. So we used to have the ability to open from a web form. You can call in and have a live answer, but you're sitting there and in a call queue and email in. But the problem becomes when you have all these different intake methods, it gets very hard to prioritize. So what we did was we went to a callback only help desk. We do have a live answer with the integration into the PSA to open the ticket on behalf of that end user. If it's a P1, yes, you get passed off directly to an engineer. And what's nice now is that engineer can answer the phone because they're not sitting there in a call queue and always on the phone. I think it creates more of a relaxed environment for the help desk, as relaxed as a hectic help desk could be.
I was going to say,
A little more relaxed environment where you're not sitting there with the phone ringing off the hook while you're trying to fix something. All of a sudden, a P1 comes in. You're able to focus. The tickets are being opened for you. You're not answering the phone. Give me 1 second while I open this and then start working on it. It's a little less chaotic. Um, we sent a survey out right after we did this, about 6 months in, and all but one client said that our response time has increased. So I think that we did this way back in, around that same time, that 2018, 2019 timeframe.
Let's talk a little bit about where you guys are at when it comes to scalability and working to, like, when you get to the point where you want to put another pod together, like, how does that look for you? Like, you were talking about, well, you get to a certain size, like, what's the minimum number of people you're going to put into a pod, right? So that you can maintain integrity. Like, how does that look for you? Obviously we know what the max level is, but when do people know it's time to create a new pod, I guess?
So we knew it was time to create a new pod when we got to that breaking point with accountability. When we got to that, 12, 15 direct reports, we had to break the team up. It also helps too, because now you're putting two more, when you break into a pod, you're putting two more positions in. And these are two more positions that you can potentially move somebody into. So it's another, hop or another progression for an engineer that wants to potentially step into management, right? So what we're able to do now is say, hey, I would say minimum 4 to 6 people in a pod. And that would be having with a team lead on top. And the reason why is because, again, you need the ability to be fluid in that pod. So again, 4 engineers, 2 escalations, and a team lead. I would say in my mindset would be as small as I would end up going.
Are you assigning clients to the pod, or is the pod, like, how does the pod actually operate so that you can maintain some level of, capacity planning or whatnot, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. So until now, we've basically had pods for accountability purposes, not for client breakdown or technical breakdown or specific skill sets. But we're actually in the middle of moving over now to splitting the company in half, and then assigning pods based on the company. And the reason why is because as you start growing, one of one of our struggles is a client saying, hey, when we call in, we've gotten 3 different engineers that we've never talked to before. Over here, it's funny. Like we always say, it was so much easier when we were just 4 or 5 guys in a room. Everybody knew everything that was going on at every client. So that's one of the things that we certainly, it's one of our challenges over here. So we have, basically 4 pods that are going to come down into 2 separate sides of the company. And we're starting with splitting the company in half.
And so when you talk about that, you're talking about just splitting the client base between 2 different groups of engineering pods, and then potentially account management, like
Yeah, that's
inside
correct.
sales. Like, so how does the service pod interact with we'll call it the strategic and or revenue generating, revenue retention part of your company? Like, how
Sure.
does that work?
So it's a great question. When we started looking at how we're going to split the pods up or the clients up, at first we said, we have technical account managers here, and that's who. Those are our VCTOs. Those are our strategic planners. Those are who are having those meetings and those QBRs with the SBRs with our clients. We said that would be great if we can just split them up by TAM. The problem is that it didn't work. We said, okay, let's try this by ticket volume. Sure. So we split everything down by ticket volume, and it didn't work because you have complexity differences. And we said, okay, let's take a step back. Let's just take a look at how many hours are spent for each of these clients against these tickets, and then let's split this up by how much work is actually being done at those clients every month. So that's where we're at now. Is we've got the splits down pretty well. I'm looking at probably 2 months down the road, we're going to make the split, and we're doing it based on the amount of time being spent on the clients. So, move one client over here, it shifts the amount of time, and we're trying to keep these relatively even. And again, being able to not go too far, kind of virtually splitting the company in half. If someone's out that day, 2 people, 3 people are out that day, it's not going to be that hard to maintain. And we'll still have different boards and views where if one side of the company, these pods are light and the other pods are getting slammed, we can have people, move between. But that's stuff that we haven't figured out yet.
Yeah. No, I mean, it sounds like it, to me, it sounds like it's the natural evolution of going into pods is that there needs to be some level I would call of specialization within the pod. What goes on in those service pods is going to have to be directly translated effectively to the account management team. And I think one of the challenges that I've seen is how do you make sure that an account manager who has clients in multiple pods is able to keep a pulse on what's going on without having to interrupt the lead of each of those pods in order to understand how their accounts are being impacted or what needs to happen. Have you figured that out, or is that why you're making this change? Like, are you using AI to potentially look at, like, maybe giving them service notes? Like, here's a list of stuff that your client, like, how are you addressing that potential issue?
Yeah, that's a great question. We haven't crossed that bridge yet. Again, we're in the process of doing this. We're still a couple months out, but no, we haven't crossed that bridge yet. We haven't. Maybe on episode 14, I could be back and
You're like, let me tell you about this thing that happened that maybe I should have asked you more questions about. Um, it's a thing that I've seen in other MSPs only just because, like, and you know how account managers are, and rightfully so. They're like, I want to know what's going on with my accounts. And
of course
so,
they have to.
yeah. And so what winds up being, I think, difficult is if you're an account manager and you need to have a scheduled meeting on a regular basis with 5 different, pod leads versus maybe I would have it with 1 or 2 so I can find out what's going on with my accounts. It's a thing that winds up becoming time consuming for both, because then you have to assume that lead on the pod has to now have a meeting with every single account manager as well. And so it begins to take up a bunch of extra time for everybody that may not be productive.
I could tell you that we do meet a lot. We maybe too much, right? So we have an account management meeting every morning. Basically, that goes over just the pulse of the professional services team, what projects are going. We have all the leads in the company, along with the account managers in that meeting. We break out those meetings into department meetings. Those department meetings break out into pod huddles. So anything discussed on our 9 a.m. call does trickle down to everybody in the company. And I think that that's probably one of the things that we haven't talked about with remote employees is the importance of meeting and the importance of really getting communication out to the entire company.
I would say though that, like, and I do want to touch on that because I'm glad you brought it up when it comes to remote work and pods and building out that structure. One of the things that I thought was really important that never really occurred to me until we focused on it was how your meetings need to be purposeful and
Yeah,
deliberate, because you
yeah,
used to be able to get away with a lot of just drive by and you were all in an office. And so it did feel like there was a lot of extra meetings. Can you talk about, like, the challenges that you guys have seen with that, like, and how that has worked, and maybe some places where you've found some relief in how you put that together,
yeah.
or
I think
philosophy?
it's sure. I would say that it's quicker, more agile meetings. Again, to the point, like have an agenda. This is what we talk about. This is who runs the meeting and move on. Like you can't sit there all day. You have too many people in these meetings. It costs the company too much. There's other crap going on. Like if shit's going crazy and everybody's sitting in a meeting, especially in that first AM meeting, you have every team lead in there. You have all your department heads in a single meeting. Like you need to be in and out. It has to be agile. Um, yeah, you know me. I ramble a little bit. So sometimes some of these meetings go on and get off subject and stuff like that. But again, it's the cadence is there. It's gotta have an agenda. It's gotta be quick. It's gotta be agile. Get the points across, and then get out and break out into your other huddles.
One of the things that I really like to tell my clients is I like having specific purpose-driven meetings for things that used to be interruptive, right? And I'll bring up an example. Um, I would have people that would swing by my office and they would say, "Hey, you got a minute?" Like, sure. And they'd say, "Hey, I got this thing going on with this client. I need some advice on it." And I would say, "I would love to help you. I'm always here for you." However, I'm going to ask you a very simple question. Will this hold until our meeting on Wednesday? And if they sit there and they go, well, you know what? Actually, yeah, I don't need an answer right this second. It will hold. I was like, okay, cool. Let's talk about it on Wednesday. I would say more than half of the time on Wednesday, I'd be like, that thing you came by my office. They're like, oh no, I figured it out. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm like, cool. So
Push
like
back
you actually like went out and figured it out on your own and now it's
and
solved.
learned.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So I love purposeful meetings and I like to have cadence meetings like that so that I can try to drive to having a more productive meeting. However, I will say that that can sometimes backfire. And so my question to you is, if you saturate some of these purposeful meetings with too many like one-off tasks, like how do you track it? How do you manage it? Like, how do you keep your meetings on track? Like, how do you keep those meetings specific?
So I can think of one, I guess what would be considered an L10 that we have every week that just goes off the rails. We have it scheduled for a half hour. It's typically an hour, hour and a half meeting, because we're jamming too much into it. We tried to go from Planner to Planner Pro so we can add some more cool stuff in there, and it's not working. I could tell you our daily meeting more often, right? So again, that the huddles are quick, they're agile, they're purposeful, they're in and out, and you move on with your day. Those meetings go so well. This other meeting that I'm referencing is just it drags, and you have so many people in there that are just, they don't need to be hearing half of the stuff that's going on in that meeting. But what I think what we're going to do is that's actually a team that we're going to break up into smaller teams and
Yeah,
try to do the same thing. That's going to break out into 3 separate smaller teams.
that's great. Like, I think that that answer is actually fantastic for people who are wondering where to start, which is like, not everybody has to be in every meeting, as much as they want to be. I think, obviously you get politics involved in some companies who are like, well, that person was in this meeting and now they're not, and they're going to be upset. And, I mean, I guess you got to break some eggs, but,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
Now, again, I'm all about the small, agile, purposeful, quick meetings. We're all busy. Like we need to just get to the point and get out.
yeah, no, I love that. I love that. So in kind of wrapping up here, we're going to get to our questions in just a second, but what, I'm going to surprise you here because I didn't actually prepare you for this question. What is the one thing that I think, you want everybody to walk away from here knowing, before they take this journey of starting to build out more specific and purpose-driven teams, whether that's a pod or that's a more refined service center, where you can create accountability, where remote work becomes possible? What do you want people to walk away from because they're like, I don't know where to start this journey, or I've started it and it sucks and I don't like it and I can't get my hands around it? If we were in our peer group and you had to grab somebody, over drinks the first night and they were like, Jon, you seem to have your shit together. Like, I'm stumbling here. What the fuck do I do? What would you tell them?
That's a good question. Like, it really depends. A smaller company, I would say if you can find subject matter expert, that there's a deficiency in your company and you're having a hard time trying to backfill or fill a position, start looking remotely. I mean, it's super easy to get someone that's in a higher level seat because typically they're more seasoned in the industry, potentially don't need as much of managerial oversight. Maybe that kind of tag team that I was talking about before may work. But yeah, those higher level positions I feel like are easier to fill remote, and that could be a good starting point, right? I would say the hardest thing for us is managing our first line support remotely. So it's much easier to manage a seasoned L2, L3 engineer remote than it is a first line support.
And with the first line support, do you feel like the reason it's more difficult is just because the volume of work that they have to do, or the inability to track that work, or like where is it a chicken or the egg thing? Like, do you hire the person before you lay out the ability to track the KPIs, or do you start tracking the KPIs first and then hire the people? Like, what has worked for you, and what advice would you give?
So I would say it comes down to process. I think there's more procedures on the help desk when you're talking about a first line support engineer, right? They have to remember so many different things. It's hard to train them and track them and monitor and see what they're doing all day, where if you hire a remote project engineer and you hand them a project and you kind of show them the project structure of your professional services team, it's much easier to manage and maintain that at arm's length than it is an L2 engineer, excuse me, a first line support engineer.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I have really enjoyed the conversation, but we're not done yet. I'm going to ask you some questions.
Cool, cool.
All
I'm
right.
excited.
So these are fun. Okay. What is the best book you ever read that helped you in business?
I don't have a book that I can mention. What I can tell you is that I do read a lot of online content and follow subject matter experts and rely on our peer groups to continue to learn and grow. And just really just rely heavily on other peers in the industry. And you're one of those peers, Andrew.
Oh,
And
well,
I know you
that's nice.
for 7 years now, and we've have text conversations back and forth, just kind
Yeah.
of thinking out loud and being able to learn and grow together.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'll say this about, you're one of the more engineering minds. And I mean that with the most respect possible, because when you're building an operations team and you're building processes, I believe it takes somebody who's got foresight into engineering and mechanics and stuff to look at something in the way that you look at it as a structural system, like almost visually, where you're like, if I put this piece here and I put this piece here, what does that do to this other output? Like, and it's been fascinating to watch how your mind works, because it's not always the same as mine, because I look at it more academically, and you're very like structural when you're building out your processes. So it's been really interesting to understand how you've applied your backstory, right? Of being just like, you're very hands-on when it comes to this sort of stuff. So it's been the application of that has been fun to watch, right? It's been really
Awesome.
cool.
Bouncing stuff off of you because we think differently is awesome, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because like mostly today we've actually agreed on a lot of stuff. Well, there have been times where we've actually just cursed at each other for like 30 minutes.
Absolutely. Like this.
Yeah. Like, you're fucking wrong. Like, well, you're wrong. And then eventually we're like, we're both probably wrong.
Yeah.
We'll find a middle ground.
We'll find a middle ground somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. So, speaking of, I've just used some fun language. What's your favorite curse word?
Man, this is a hard one. I'm gonna go with a straight up generic fuck, and not the noun fuck, not the adjective, not the verb, but like you can use it so many different ways, man. You can use it as a prefix, right?
Yeah.
Fuck, man. You can use it as but my favorite way is like an interfix, right? I live in the town Massapequa. It's Massa-fucking-Pequa. That's how fuck is an interfix. But dude, you could say it everywhere. You can replace any word with it. It could be any type of word. It's fun, man. Fuck.
I like, yeah, I like, that's why, if I had to pick one, I use it as like, seasoning in my language. Like,
Sure.
it can be, it doesn't have to be biting and rude. It can just be sprinkled in like pepper or oregano.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I love that. Okay. This is my favorite question for you. What is your favorite band and why? Because you're a music guy, so I'm excited.
Yeah. So I could say the first band that really just took me on a journey and opened up so many different avenues is Pink Floyd, man. That's like my one. If I had to listen to a single band for the rest of my life, and like that's so hard to say, and I would listen to Floyd. I mean you look at their real early Sid Barrett stuff, and it's very different than when Gilmore joined the band, and at the very end, before they not the very end because that was all Gilmore, but you heard the fighting within the band came out in the music, like the struggles of the overpowering bass trying to be that front man, and like, but again, it's just they take you on a journey, and it's more of an experience and a feeling than it is anything, and just, man, I love Floyd.
Honestly, that's not the first time I've heard that on the podcast. So we've now got a couple of solid votes for Floyd.
Awesome.
I kind of expected that because I know that you're a huge David Gilmour guy, but I'm all right.
Oh yeah. It wasn't always either, like as I get older, I like Gilmore more. I really do.
Yeah. Well, and I think I watched there was this really great documentary about I guess they call them the marketing team that kind of built up around Floyd. If you have a chance to watch it, and I'm terrible because I should remember the name of it, but it was amazing because of how, like, it wasn't just the music with Floyd, but like all the things that went with it, like the development of the art around their album covers. And like, cause
Oh
up
yeah.
to that point, albums were just the pictures of the guys in the band, like doing something silly or like standing in a field or whatever. And they were like, yeah, no, we're going to go ahead and do like a floating pig, or we're going to be like, yeah, we're going to create a prism, right, of light through a triangle. Like, I mean, it was just like weird shit that they would do.
I mean, look at
And
metal. That's an ear. No one really knows that. When you look at the album cover, you don't even know what it is. Now all of a
yeah,
sudden you realize it's an ear. It's kind of weird.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it's really cool. Like all of it came together for them and they came in the right time. So dig it. Um,
absolutely.
okay. So you please don't name names, right? But what is the worst client, like, or client meeting or sales meeting that you were ever at, and what, like, just an absolute train wreck? Like you were there and you were just like, this was awful.
Early in my career, I used to use the mute button religiously. I was angry. I was not as laid back and chill as I am now.
Yeah.
Man, I'm gonna name two things. One of them was a vendor. It was Red Hat, and they were trying to sell us their virtualization solution. It wasn't a client call, but I'm sitting there with our CTO, and we're in our old conference room, and I just remember like explaining our private cloud and what we're doing there, and like he kept like not understanding and like pushing this one piece, and I hit the fucking mute button. I was like, this guy doesn't fucking listen. And then like there was this long pause, and all of a sudden he's like, I'm sorry you feel that way. Me and Chris looked at each other. I left the room cracking up. I don't know how he stayed in there, but he ended up he ended up finishing that call. Um,
That's
and then I have
amazing.
another. Yeah, I probably shouldn't mention the other call, but it's very similar. We were, we have our own VoIP company, and
Yes.
we were testing phones for a company, and we were beta testing a handset, and the mute button didn't work with the headset connected. And I had said something. Needless to say, we lost the client. But it was again early in my career. I didn't have the restraint that I have now. I was a little uptight. I was angry. Why don't they understand? So I hit the mute button. I said something stupid and regretfully said something stupid. And we ended up losing the client over it. But yeah, that's beta testing a handset. Mute button didn't work with the headset.
That's those are amazing. And I've never heard those before. And so that's
Yeah.
fantastic. I love that. I love that shit. So if I were to try to schedule another podcast with somebody that totally kicks ass in this industry, that has a very unique opinion, is great at what they do, what person, not necessarily a group, like what person would you recommend in the
I
MSP
would
space?
recommend, I know right off the bat, man, we've been working closely with them lately. It's our Halo consultant, Connor, and his team. Connor specifically made us think very different about our tool set and how we use our tools. Renata Solutions, they're fantastic. I would say Connor over there. If you can get him on this podcast, he's awesome. He really is.
I can't tell you what an honor it is to have a chance to speak with you today. This has been absolutely fantastic. You're one of my favorite people on the planet, not just in MSP. So, you and I have spent many a late night catching up about like life and, our jobs. So thanks. Like, you're a completely kick-ass human being and a great friend and a wonderful dad and husband. And I look up to you a lot. And so I just want to say thanks for being on the show.
Andrew, likewise, man. I mean, you've used all the words that I could possibly potentially say back to you, but bro, you're the man. I appreciate you thinking about me to come into here and to chat with you, and it's always a pleasure, really is. I know we haven't seen each other in person in a while. We got to
It's
plan
yeah,
something. It's been like a year.
I know. We'll this year, 2026 is the year we'll get together. We'll get
Sounds
I
good.
need to get up to New York at some point. So maybe that's just what we'll do. I'll just
I
go.
think that's the last time I saw you. When we went to see Billy Joel.
We did go to see Billy Joel, and that was awesome.
One of his last shows.
I know, and it was like last minute, and we totally got tickets, and I was shocked, and it was completely incredible. And we sang Piano Man and New York State of Mind with 30,000 other people, and it was awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome.
All right, man. Well, take care of yourself.
You too. Much appreciated again, Andrew. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy.
Well, that's it for the How to MSP podcast. We'd like to thank our special guest, Jon Katz. We'd also like to invite you to subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting service. If you're watching us on YouTube, smash the subscribe button. Every like and subscription helps us find new listeners. Thanks, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.